Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is the Green Lantern, the Silver Age Volume 1 by DC Comics. So this is the third video in the Discovering Green Lantern series, and I kind of regret doing the second one, not because it was bad, but because I think I should have done more Silver Age Green Lantern before I did Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams' take on the Green Lantern and Green Arrow a miniseries. Well, not really a miniseries, just I guess an arc with the Green Lantern and Green Arrow. And I think if I would have done more of these Silver Age comics beforehand, I would have gotten the context a little bit better for where the Green Lantern needed to be ahead of time when I did Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. Anyhow, it is what it is. I'll make it up in these next couple videos. I'm going to do a couple more Silver Age comics. In this case, this is Green Lantern number 7. And that's what the video title is for, as well as number 9. And these two are very important issues because the first part stories, because these old Green Lantern comic books had 2 Green Lantern stories in each comic, both have to deal with Sinestro and the introduction of Sinestro as the Green Lantern, in particular Hal Jordan's primary villain. So this story here is the day 100,000 people vanished. So Green Lantern is going to a city, Valedale, to do a little event there. And for whatever reason, everybody in Valedale disappears, and the Green Lantern has to figure out what the hell happened. So very interesting character. This is Pie Face. He's supposed to be an Eskimo. And yeah, there's a lot of stereotypes for this character of in the 1950s. There's another story, I think, just before this one with Pie Face and his lady, and it's a little bad. It's a little bad. I'm not gonna lie. But this is the Green Lantern of the 1950s of this era, so I kind of get it when I read it now, and I kind of understand not to kind of put my views on the world within the context of this comic from the 1950s. Anyhow, he kind of acts as a sidekick for Hal Jordan in these earlier issues. So he's trying to figure out what the heck happened, and suddenly he gets summoned over to the Guardians. The Guardians explained to him the origin of Sinestro. He was basically a Green Lantern, and then he got kind of power hungry and corrupt, and the Guardians of Oa were forced to basically strip him of all of his powers and banish him to the evil antimatter universe of Kuard. Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you, the old stories involving Kuard are hard to read through, mainly because the dialogue is really, really cliche of the 1950s and 60s. So also everybody in Kuard looks like a bald weirdo, like some dude who definitely owns an ice cream truck or who's it? They all look like freaking the owner of Amazon, who's that weirdo. But yeah. Anyhow, Sinestro is unhappy about that, so he's going to teach the Kuards that how to be even more evil, so that he can get his vengeance. Ooh, man, the dialogue's pretty bad in this comic in particular. So the Guardians explain to him who Sinestro is and what Hal Jordan needs to do. And what's very interesting is this is the first issue where originally the Guardians, when they interacted with Hal Jordan, they would erase his memories so that he wouldn't remember who the Guardians were. In this issue, they finally allow him to remember who they are when they transport his, I guess, spiritual body back to his regular body on Earth. And this kind of leads to a more interesting interaction. This is more of the Green Lantern being officially more integrated into the bigger Green Lantern universe, right? So Hal Jordan goes off, finds a way to get into the Kuard world to face off against Sinestro. Sinestro and the Kuards ambush him. Then they capture him in a yellow bubble, and they're going to wait for his power ring to run out of energy, which they explain in every single one of these issues and stories. Classic, very, very old school comic book telling. And they, yeah, by the way, I'm kind of going through a sickness right now, if you can't tell. It's gonna make my voice sound kind of weird, but it is what it is. So he's going to wait for 6 hours for his power ring to run out so he can basically destroy Hal Jordan. But Hal Jordan finds a way to mess with the clock such that Sinestro releases him early and Hal gets the jump on everybody. This is actually a pretty cool illustration for the 1950s at the time. This is actually pretty interesting. Hal Jordan making a tsunami out of his Green Lantern right here. relatively speaking, right? This is the 1950s. So what probably is interesting about this issue is you get an interesting little monologue by Sinestro, right? You amuse me, Green Lantern. I will tell you why. If I had caught you the way you caught me, I would have destroyed you at once. But your stupid code prevents you from killing or harming anyone if you can help it. I know that because I wore a uniform like yours myself once before I learned better. Good is helpless, evil alone can act. So some of this dialogue is cliched, but it's kind of compared to the rest of the dialogue. This monologue by Sinestro is actually somewhat, it's actually got a little bit of depth to it, which is interesting for these old comics. There's not really a lot of depth, philosophically or really thoughtful dialogue in these old comics, but this is actually pretty good. And it outlines, like, sometimes you can't look down on the old comics. They have some important points, even in the silliest ones, right? So Hal Jordan puts him in a green bubble, bounces out, recharges his batteries, and has a happy old time back at the city that he restored. Anyhow, all's well that ends well. So I'm going to jump over to Green Lantern number 9, and this we have the introduction of Sinestro's power ring. So I'm not going to go too much over into the plot, but basically Green Lantern starts having weird reliability issues with his ring. 1 out of every four men suffer, blah, 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 blah. And when he goes to recharge his ring, Sinestro ambushes him and locks his ring into the power lamp, and then explains how he escaped, and there's a bunch of explanations going on here, old school comic book telling. Manages to defeat Hal Jordan, imprisons him in a yellow cage, and then uses his power because he's going to go ambush the rest of the Green Lanterns. We get some interesting exposition right here explaining more of the Green Lanterns. I don't know if any of these characters ever got reused because their designs are pretty bad. But Sinestro ambushes all the Green Lanterns at their meeting with some big monster while he goes off to get vengeance on the Guardians. You get a little fun trick here with, split identities, which is the DC thing, right? Every character has a secret identity. In which case this cage works on the Green Lantern, but if he takes his clothes off, Hal Jordan can get out of the cage, which is like, okay, I guess, interesting play on words. He gets his ring back, and he goes to confront Sinestro. And in that one, interesting note, they basically clash rings, and Hal Jordan just basically overpowers him and outwills him to defeat Sinestro. What's kind of interesting is you could imagine Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver kind of reading all these old comics and taking little things like, like we could twist this to like. There's a lot of like basis for Green Lantern Rebirth when I read some of these old Sinestro or Green Lantern Sinestro comics, that I can kind of see now what Jeff Johns and Ethan Van Sciver were trying to do in Rebirth. Whether it worked or not, I'm going to go back and revisit Green Lantern Rebirth just so we can see. But, you get the introduction of the big, great Green Lantern power battery, and then they put Sinestro in a green pill, and they BTFO him to the other side of the universe. And all's well that ends well, and the Green Lantern is victorious, right? So really interesting looking at Sinestro, right? They explain his backstory and his motivations. He's got a lot of cliche dialogue, and there are some things about this character that, obviously his appearance is continued, but certain other aspects of this character are kind of... I know Ethan Van Sciver made a really big note on Green Lantern Rebirth that, Sinestro never smiles. But, in the old comics, he smiles all the time, especially an evil smile, right? But it's kind of interesting to see this character in his initial upbringing. And it works as a antagonist for Hal Jordan, the corrupt cop, the cop that turned on his profession, basically, since the Green Lanterns are intergalactic cops, effectively, right? But yeah, that's it for Sinestro's first 2 appearances. I will do the next one. I think I'm going to do is probably Green Lantern. I think it's 59, which is the first appearance of Guy Gardner. And then I will be doing Green Lantern. I think it's 80 something, but it is a return to Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams. It's the first appearance of John Stewart as the Green Lantern. And I think I'm going to do what is it? Carol later gets a superheroine identity, something Sapphire. I'll probably do that one too, though it's not nearly as important as Guy Gardner and John Stewart. Anyhow, if you like this video, please like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you have any comments about Sinestro, the first appearance of Sinestro, or old Silver Age Green Lantern, leave them down below, and I will see you next time.